In the quiet halls of a small-town high school, Monica, a dedicated black teacher, quickly realizes her new job won't be as simple as she'd hoped. Under the direction of Principal Greer, a man whose prejudice is matched only by his powerful connections on the school board, Monica faces subtle but persistent harassment. Each day, Greer's behavior grows bolder, but Monica stands firm, determined not to let him shake her resolve. What Greer doesn't know is that Monica's husband is Captain Elijah Harris, a man who isn't one to let injustice go unchecked. Before we dive into this gripping story of courage and standing up to abuse of power, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire. The August sun beat down mercilessly on Monica Harris as she stood before Riverside High School's imposing brick facade. At 32, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew their worth, her dark brown eyes scanning the building that would become her new workplace. Her natural hair was styled in neat, professional twists, and her yellow sundress provided a cheerful contrast to the stern architecture of the school. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, clutching her leather portfolio closer to her chest. The morning air was thick with humidity, typical of small-town Georgia summers. After 15 years in Atlanta, the slower pace of Riverside felt like stepping into another world entirely. The move hadn't been her idea. When Elijah, her husband of 8 years, received the promotion to police captain in Riverside, they'd agreed it was an opportunity too good to pass up. Besides, Monica had always believed she could make a difference anywhere. Her passion for teaching transcended zip codes. "You must be Mrs. Harris," a voice called out, interrupting her thoughts. She turned to see a tall, thin man in his 50s approaching. His gray suit looked expensive but somehow still managed to hang awkwardly on his frame. His smile didn't quite reach his pale blue eyes. "Principal Greer," Monica extended her hand, maintaining her warm smile despite the immediate chill she felt from his demeanor. "It's wonderful to finally meet you in person." Lester Greer's handshake was brief, his fingers barely gracing hers before withdrawing. Yes, well, the board was quite insistent on filling this position quickly. He gave her another once-over, his lips tightening slightly. "Though I must say, your appearance is rather different from what I expected based on your credentials." Monica's smile didn't waver, though something twisted in her stomach. She'd encountered this kind of subtle prejudice before, the kind that hid behind pleasantries and passive-aggressive remarks. "I assure you, my appearance aligns perfectly with my qualifications, Mr. Greer. 15 years of teaching experience, master's in education, and a track record of improving student performance across all demographics." "Indeed," he replied, his tone suggesting anything but agreement. "Well, things are different here in Riverside compared to— Where did you say you were from again?" "Atlanta," Monica answered, keeping her voice steady. "Though I've taught in various districts throughout my career." "Ah, yes. The city," he said it like it was a disease. "Well, Mrs. Harris, you'll find we have our own way of doing things here. Our community values tradition." He began walking toward the building, expecting her to follow. Traditional values, traditional methods, traditional appearances. Monica took a deep breath before following him. She thought of Elijah's proud face this morning as he'd straightened his new captain's uniform, of his excitement about making positive changes in this small community. She couldn't let this man's prejudices affect her mission here. Inside, the school hallways were empty, their footsteps echoing against the freshly waxed floors. The walls were lined with photos of past graduating classes. Monica couldn't help but notice the stark lack of diversity in them. "Your classroom will be 204, Greer announced, leading her upstairs. "Though I should mention, we've had some concerns about your teaching methods." He paused at the top of the stairs, turning to face her. "Your application mentioned something about cultural responsiveness and inclusive education. We prefer more traditional approaches here." Monica's jaw tightened slightly. "My methods are based on proven educational research, Mr. Greer. They help all students succeed, regardless of their background." "Mrs. Harris," he said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone, "I'm sure your urban teaching style worked well in Atlanta, but our students require a different approach. We've maintained excellent standards here for generations, and we intend to keep it that way." They reached her classroom, and Monica's heart lifted slightly at the sight of the bright, sunny space. Despite Greer's presence, she could already envision how she'd arrange the desks, where she'd put her reading corner, how she'd decorate the walls to make it welcoming for all students. "I notice you're wearing rather bold colors," Greer commented, eyeing her yellow dress. "Our dress code for teachers typically favors more subdued tones. Navy, black, gray, professional colors." Monica squared her shoulders. "I assure you, my attire is both professional and appropriate, Mr. Greer." Students respond well to warmth and approachability in their teachers. He replied, his disapproval evident. "Well, we'll see how that works out. The faculty meeting starts in 30 minutes in the library. Try not to be late. Punctuality is another tradition we value highly here." Monica waited until she was sure he was gone before letting out a long breath. She moved to her new desk, placing her portfolio down and taking a moment to collect herself. Opening her phone, she saw a text from Elijah. "Hope your first day is amazing, beautiful. You're going to change lives there, just like you always do. Love you." A smile touched her lips as she typed back, "Thanks, baby. Love you too." She decided not to mention Greer's behavior. Elijah had enough on his plate with his new position, and besides, she'd dealt with prejudiced administrators before. She could handle this. Moving to the windows, Monica opened them wide, letting in fresh air and sunlight. The view overlooked the school's courtyard, where a few early arriving teachers were walking in. She noticed how they all wore dark, muted colors, just as Greer had mentioned. Well, they'd have to get used to something different. She began unpacking her supplies, each item carefully chosen to create an inviting learning environment. Colorful posters celebrating diverse historical figures, motivational quotes, and academic resources soon brightened the stark walls. As she worked, she could hear Greer's voice echoing in her mind. "Things are different here." Different indeed, she thought, but different didn't always mean better. She'd encountered plenty of Lester Greers in her career. Men who thought their position gave them the right to demean others, who clung to their prejudices like security blankets. Usually, they revealed themselves more slowly, but Greer seemed almost proud of his biases. The sound of voices in the hallway indicated other teachers were arriving. Monica straightened her dress and checked her reflection in her compact mirror. Her mother had always taught her that dignity was the best response to prejudice, and she intended to carry herself with exactly that. As she headed toward the library for the faculty meeting, Monica's mind wandered to her students, who would be arriving next week when classes began. How many of them would be like her, different from the majority in this small town? How many would need someone to show them they could succeed despite the Lester Greers of the world? The library was already half full when she arrived, and the reaction to her entrance was subtle but noticeable. Conversations dimmed slightly. Eyes darted her way before quickly looking elsewhere. Chairs shifted uncomfortably. Monica recognized the choreography of discomfort that often accompanied being the only black person in a room. She chose a seat near the front, pulling out her notebook and pen. A few moments later, a young white woman with kind eyes took the seat beside her. "Hi," the woman whispered, offering a genuine smile. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, English department. You must be Monica Harris?" "That's right," Monica replied, grateful for the friendly face. "Nice to meet you, Sarah." "Just a heads up," Sarah murmured, glancing around. Greer usually likes new teachers to introduce themselves to the faculty. "He'll probably call on you." Before Monica could respond, Greer cleared his throat at the podium. His eyes fixed on Monica with an unsettling intensity. "Welcome, faculty, to another year at Riverside High," he began, his voice carrying that same false warmth she'd heard earlier. "As you can see, we have some new additions to our family this year." His emphasis on the word family made it clear just who he considered part of it and who he didn't. Monica sat straighter in her chair, her expression composed. She'd faced men like Lester Greer before, and she'd face them again. But something about this particular man sent warning signals through her mind, a sixth sense honed by years of navigating spaces where she wasn't entirely welcome. As Greer continued his opening remarks, Monica couldn't shake the feeling that this year would test her in ways she hadn't expected. But But she was ready. She had to be, not just for herself, but for every student who would walk through her classroom door needing someone to believe in them. The morning sun streamed through the library windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Monica watched as one of these shadows stretched toward her feet, like a dark finger pointing her way. She lifted her chin slightly, determination settling into her bones. Let Greer play his games. She had work to do, students to teach, and lives to change. And no small-town principal with outdated views was going to stand in her way. The first week of school had barely begun when Monica noticed the shift in Principal Greer's behavior. What started as subtle disapproval evolved into something more systematic, more deliberate. It began on a Tuesday morning, just as her students were filing into class. "Mrs. Harris," Greer's voice cut through the cheerful morning chatter. He stood in her doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow across the threshold. "A word about your classroom environment?" Monica looked up from where she was helping a student with her books. "Of course, Mr. Greer. Would after class be better? We're about to start our morning routine. Now, if you please." His tone left no room for discussion. "Class, please wait quietly for your teacher's return." In the hallway, Greer's eyes swept over the recently decorated walls of her classroom, visible through the open door. "I couldn't help but notice your choice of decorations." "The posters?" Monica asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. She'd carefully selected images representing diverse historical figures, scientists, and authors. Their educational materials designed to inspire all students to see themselves in successful roles. Greer's lips thinned. "This isn't Atlanta, Mrs. Harris. Our students don't need to be confused about their place in society. I suggest you stick to more traditional academic imagery." "With all due respect, Mr. Greer, research shows that representation in educational materials significantly impacts student achievement. We've maintained excellent academic standards here for decades without such modern approaches," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Perhaps you should focus more on fitting into our culture rather than trying to change it." Before Monica could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway, her hands clenched at her sides. Taking a deep breath, she returned to her classroom, determined not to let her students see how deeply his words had affected her. The incidents continued, growing more frequent as the days passed. During a faculty meeting the following week, Monica raised her hand to share her observations about student engagement strategies. "As I've noticed in my classes," she began. "Thank you, Mrs. Harris." Greer cut her off mid-sentence. "But we'll stick to proven methodologies that have worked for our community." Moving on, Sarah, sitting beside Monica, shot her a sympathetic glance. After the meeting, they walked together to the teacher's lounge. "I'm sorry about that," Sarah said, checking to ensure they were alone. "Greer's always been particular, but he seems especially focused on you." Monica sighed, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I've noticed, but I've dealt with this kind of behavior before. I can handle it." Sarah hesitated, playing with her coffee mug. "There's something you should know about Greer," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "His brother-in-law, Richard Thompson, sits on the school board. That's why he's so untouchable." Monica raised an eyebrow. "The school board? The one that would handle any complaints against him?" Sarah nodded. "Last year, a teacher filed a complaint about his discriminatory behavior. Within a month, she was transferred to the worst school in the district. The year before that, another teacher who spoke up suddenly found herself teaching remedial classes instead of AP courses. That's illegal, Monica said, her jaw tightening. It's also impossible to prove, Sarah replied. Greer's smart about it. Everything looks legitimate on paper. Thompson makes sure any formal complaints disappear, and the rest of the board follows his lead. They're all old friends, part of the same country club. You know the type? Monica thought of Elijah, imagining his reaction if she told him about Greer's behavior. Her husband's protective instincts would kick in immediately, and he'd want to intervene. But he was already facing his own challenges as the town's first black police captain. The last thing he needed was to get involved in a school district controversy. The next day, Greer appeared in her classroom during her planning period. He carried a clipboard and wore what Monica had come to think of as his evaluation expression. a mixture of disdain and false concern. "Mrs. Harris, your attire continues to be a concern," he began, eyeing her professional but colorful dress. "The parents in this community expect a certain standard of appearance from their children's teachers." Monica set down her grading pen. "Mr. Greer, my clothing is well within the professional dress code. If you have specific concerns, I'd be happy to review the policy with you." "The policy doesn't cover everything, Mrs. Harris. There's also the matter of cultural fit. Your hair, for instance." "My hair is professionally styled and has no bearing on my teaching abilities," Monica interrupted, her voice firm but controlled. "Unless you have any feedback about my actual teaching methods or student outcomes, I need to return to my work." Greer's face darkened. "Your attitude is precisely the problem. You city people come here thinking you can change everything overnight. This community has values, traditions. My values include providing every student with the best possible education," Monica stated. "That's a tradition I'm proud to uphold." Later that afternoon, Monica found a note in her mailbox. It was a formal observation report, citing her for unprofessional conduct and resistance to administrative guidance. Her hands shook as she read it, but not from fear, from anger. During her next class, she watched her students engage in a group discussion about To Kill a Mockingbird. Their insights were thoughtful, their engagement genuine. These were the moments that reminded her why she became a teacher. "Mrs. Harris?" One of her students, a quiet girl named Jessica, approached her desk after class. "I just wanted to say, I really like how you teach. My brother had this class last year, and he said it was boring. But you make everything interesting." Monica smiled, feeling her resolve strengthen. "Thank you, Jessica. That means a lot to me." The following week brought more incidents. During a parent-teacher conference night, Greer hovered near her classroom, intercepting parents before they could reach her. "Mrs. Harris is still adjusting to our community standards," she overheard him telling one parent. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable with Mrs. Harrington's class? She has a more traditional approach." Each day brought new criticisms, new attempts to undermine her authority. Greer questioned her lesson plans, criticized her classroom management, and made pointed remarks about her lack of cultural understanding. During lunch, Sarah shared more stories about Greer's history at the school. "He's been here for 15 years, she explained. "Built this little empire where everyone dances to his tune. The few teachers who've tried to challenge him, well, they're not here anymore, and everyone just accepts this?" Monica asked, watching the other teachers in the lounge, noting how they kept their voices down and their heads bowed. Sarah shrugged helplessly. "What choice do we have? Most of us can't afford to lose our jobs or get transferred. We have families, mortgages." Monica thought about her own situation. She could look for another job, maybe even return to Atlanta. But that would mean letting Greer win, letting down her students, and possibly compromising Elijah's career opportunity. No, she wouldn't give Greer that satisfaction. One morning, she arrived to find her classroom had been reorganized overnight. Her carefully arranged student discussion circles had been replaced with traditional rows, and many of her multicultural posters had been removed. The custodial staff must have gotten carried away during cleaning, Greer said when she confronted him, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Perhaps this is a sign that a more traditional arrangement would better serve our students." Monica simply nodded, waited for him to leave, and then spent her planning period restoring the classroom to its previous state. When Greer returned later and saw the changes, his face turned an interesting shade of red, but Monica merely continued teaching, her voice steady and confident. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Elijah noticed her unusual quietness. "Everything okay at school, babe?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Monica leaned back into his embrace, considering her response. "Just the usual adjustment period," she said finally. "Nothing I can't handle." "You sure?" "You know I could." "I'm sure," she interrupted gently. "How was your day? Any progress with the community outreach program you mentioned?" As Elijah launched into a description of his plans for the police department, Monica silently reaffirmed her decision to handle Greer on her own. Her husband was fighting his own battles for respect and acceptance in his new role. She wouldn't add to his burden. The next day, Monica received an email from Greer requesting her presence at a meeting with the department heads. When she arrived, she found herself facing not just Greer, but several senior faculty members. "Mrs. Harris," Greer began, his voice dripping with false concern, "we've been discussing your unconventional approaches. While we appreciate your enthusiasm, we feel that your teaching methods may be too progressive for our community." Monica sat straight in her chair, meeting each person's gaze. Most couldn't hold eye contact for long. "My methods are based on current educational research and best practices. My students' engagement and performance speak for themselves. Test scores aren't everything," Greer countered. "There's also the matter of cultural preservation. Our community has certain expectations." "My job is to educate all students," Monica interrupted firmly, "to prepare them for success in a diverse, modern world." "That's not progressive, Mr. Greer. That's responsible teaching." The meeting ended with thinly veiled threats about performance reviews and cultural fit evaluations, but Monica left with her head high. In her classroom, she found her students waiting, eager to learn, unaware of the political battles being fought around them. As she launched into her lesson about civil rights literature, Monica noticed something had changed within her. The fear and uncertainty she'd initially felt when facing Greer's harassment had transformed into something stronger: determination. Every attempt to diminish her only made her more resolved to succeed. During her free period, she documented every interaction with Greer, every observation, report, every email. She might not be ready to file a formal complaint yet, but she would be prepared when the time came. Sarah caught up with her after school. "I heard about the meeting," she said, worry etched on her face. "Monica, be careful. When Greer gets like this—" "I know the risks," Monica replied calmly. "But I also know that sometimes someone has to take a stand. If not me, then who?" As she drove home that evening, Monica reflected on her situation. Greer might have the school board in his pocket, might have decades of entrenched power backing him up, but she had something he couldn't understand or diminish: the quiet strength that came from generations of ancestors who had faced down prejudice and emerged unbroken. She thought of her students, especially the few who, like her, didn't fit Greer's narrow vision of what belonged in Riverside High. They needed to see someone stand up, someone demonstrate that dignity and determination could overcome prejudice and power. That night, as she prepared for the next day's classes, Monica added a new poster to her classroom wall: Maya Angelou's words in bold letters: "Still I rise." Let Greer make what he would of that. The autumn chill had settled over Riverside High when Monica noticed a distinct change in Principal Greer's tactics. His previous attempts at subtle intimidation had failed to break her spirit, and now his approach was becoming more aggressive, more personal. It started one Tuesday afternoon as Monica was preparing to leave her classroom. The hallways had emptied, most teachers already gone for the day. She was gathering her materials when a shadow fell across her desk. "Working late again, Mrs. Harris?" Greer's voice came from uncomfortably close behind her. She hadn't heard him enter. Monica straightened, maintaining professional distance as she turned to face him. "Just finishing up some grading, Mr. Greer. Was there something you needed?" He moved closer, forcing her to step back against her desk. "I've been reviewing your latest performance metrics. They're concerning." "Concerning?" Monica kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My students' test scores have improved by an average of 12% since the semester began. Numbers can be manipulated, Mrs. Harris." He leaned forward, placing both hands on her desk, effectively boxing her in. "We both know how these things work. Certain allowances are made these days. Certain quotas need to be filled." Monica felt her face flush with anger. "Are you suggesting I'm not qualified for my position?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps your particular background led to some oversights in the hiring process." His breath smelled of coffee and mint as he invaded her personal space. "But it's not too late to correct course. With the right guidance, you might still find your place here." "My place?" Monica's voice was ice cold. "My place is teaching these students, Mr. Greer. Now, if you'll excuse me." She attempted to step around him, but he shifted, blocking her path. "We're not finished here," he said, his tone dropping dangerously. You seem to have difficulty understanding your position in this school's hierarchy. Perhaps we need to have more private discussions about your role here. The sound of a door slamming somewhere down the hall made him step back finally. Monica seized the opportunity to gather her things, her hands trembling slightly as she packed her bag. Think carefully about your future here, Mrs. Harris, Greer called after her as she headed for the door. Monica's steps faltered for a moment, but she forced herself to keep walking, her heels clicking steadily against the linoleum floor. Only when she reached her car did she allow herself to release the breath she'd been holding. The incidents began to multiply. Greer would appear suddenly in empty hallways, cornering her for impromptu evaluations. He'd stand too close during faculty meetings, his presence a looming threat behind her chair. Every interaction carried an undercurrent of menace that was becoming impossible to ignore. One morning, Monica arrived to find him waiting in her classroom before first period. "Your lesson plans for this week," he said, holding up a folder. "They're unsuitable." "Those plans were approved by the department head last week," Monica replied, maintaining her distance. "I'm overriding that approval." He moved toward her, backing her toward the wall. "Your choice of literature is too inflammatory." Their eyes were watching God. "The color purple? These aren't appropriate for our students. They're classic works of American literature," Monica defended, her back literally against the wall now. "They're on the approved reading list." "The list is changing." He cut her off. "Just like other things around here need to change." His eyes traveled over her professional attire, a green wrap dress that somehow offended his sensibilities. "Your continued resistance to our culture is becoming a problem, Mrs. Harris." "The only problem here is your behavior, Mr. Greer." Monica finally snapped, her patience wearing thin. "Now please step back and maintain a professional distance." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Professional distance? Is that what you're reporting to the school board?" Monica's heart skipped a beat. She'd been careful with her documentation, building a case quietly. "How did you? Did you really think anything happens in this district without my knowledge?" He laughed, a cold sound that made her skin crawl. "My brother-in-law mentioned your little complaint letter. Quite creative fiction, I must say." Students' voices in the hallway finally forced him to step back. "Remember, Mrs. Harris, you're here on sufferance. Don't make me demonstrate just how precarious your position really is." That evening, Monica sat in her home office, staring at her computer screen. She'd spent weeks documenting every incident, building a careful case of harassment and discrimination. But Greer's words echoed in her mind, making her question everything. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Heard about this morning. Are you okay?" Monica typed back, "I'm fine, but I think it's time to take this to the board officially." Sarah's response was immediate. "Be careful. Remember what happened to Janet when she filed her complaint?" Janet Williams, the AP English teacher who'd suddenly found herself teaching remedial classes at the district's worst-performing school. Monica remembered Sarah's warnings about Greer's influence, but she couldn't stay silent any longer. She spent the weekend preparing her complaint, carefully outlining each incident with dates, times, and witnesses where possible. On Monday morning, she submitted the formal documentation to the school board office, her hand steady as she handed over the envelope. The response came faster than she expected. By Wednesday, she was called to a special board meeting after school hours. The conference room was intimidating, a long table surrounded by stern faces, with Richard Thompson, Greer's brother-in-law, seated at the center. "Mrs. Harris," Thompson began, not bothering to hide his disdain, "we've reviewed your concerns about Principal Greer's leadership." Monica sat straight-backed in her chair, facing the board with quiet dignity. "Thank you for meeting with me. I trust you've had time to review the documentation I provided?" "Yes, about that." Thompson shuffled some papers. "We find your interpretations of these interactions to be problematic. Principal Greer has served this district with distinction for 15 years. His methods, while perhaps different from what you're used to, are proven effective." "With all due respect," Monica interrupted, "his methods include harassment and discrimination. I provided specific examples. Examples that could be interpreted in many ways." Another board member cut in. She was a thin woman with perfectly coiffed gray hair who hadn't bothered to introduce herself. Perhaps you're simply having difficulty adjusting to our community standards? Monica felt her throat tighten with frustration. This isn't about adjustment. Mr. Greer has repeatedly invaded my personal space, made inappropriate comments about my race and background, and created a hostile work environment. Mrs. Harris. Thompson's voice dripped with condescension. In my experience, these accusations often stem from cultural misunderstandings. Principal Greer is an experienced administrator who understands our community's values. If you're finding it difficult to adapt, perhaps you should consider whether this position is really the right fit for you. Are you suggesting that I should leave my job because I won't tolerate harassment? Monica's voice remained steady despite her rising anger. We're suggesting that you need to be more flexible in your interpretation of administrative oversight, Thompson replied. Principal Greer has our full confidence. His methods may be direct, but they're effective. Our test scores and college admission rates speak for themselves. And the fact that those achievements come at the cost of creating a discriminatory environment doesn't concern you? The board members exchanged glances. Mrs. Harris, Thompson said finally, we've reviewed your complaint and found no evidence to support your allegations. We consider this matter closed. I suggest you focus on adapting to our school's culture rather than trying to change it. Monica stood slowly, gathering her materials. Is there an appeals process for this decision? The board's decision is final, Thompson stated flatly. And Mrs. Harris? I would caution you against pursuing this matter further. It would be unfortunate if these accusations were to affect your future employment opportunities. The threat was clear. Monica left the conference room with her head high, but her hands were shaking as she reached her car. She sat there for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed, Elijah asking if she wanted him to pick up dinner. She stared at the screen, torn between her desire to tell him everything and her determination to handle this herself. Finally, she texted back a simple yes, please. That night, as they ate Chinese takeout at their kitchen counter, Elijah noticed her distraction. Rough day. Monica pushed her low mane around her plate. Just school politics, she said vaguely. Nothing I can't handle. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? His dark eyes were concerned. I know something's been bothering you lately. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. I know, baby, but you've got enough on your plate with the department. I've got this. But as she lay awake that night, Monica wondered if she really got this. Greer's harassment was escalating. The board had made it clear they wouldn't help, and she was running out of official channels to pursue. The next morning, she found a formal reprimand in her mailbox, citing insubordination and false accusations against administration. The message was clear. The board wasn't just dismissing her complaints. They were retaliating against her for making them. Sarah caught up with her in the parking lot after school. I heard about the board meeting, she said quietly. Monica, maybe you should consider transferring before things get worse. I know a position opened up at Riverside East. No, Monica cut her off firmly. That's exactly what they want. I won't be driven out for standing up against discrimination. But what can you do? They control everything, the board, the administration, even the district transfers. Monica squared her shoulders, remembering her father's words from years ago. Sometimes, standing your ground is victory enough. I'll figure something out, she told Sarah. But I won't let them win. Not like this. As she drove home that evening, Monica's mind raced with possibilities. She could file a complaint with the State Board of Education, but that would take months. She could reach out to the teachers' union, but their influence in this conservative district was limited. What she needed was evidence, clear, undeniable proof of Greer's behavior. Something that even his brother-in-law couldn't sweep under the rug. Little did she know, events were about to force her hand in ways she never expected. The crisp October morning brought no hint of the storm about to break at Riverside High. Monica Harris stood at her classroom whiteboard, carefully writing out the day's objectives while her students filed in for first period. The familiar routine helped steady her nerves, which had been increasingly frayed by Principal Greer's escalating behavior over the past weeks. Just yesterday, he'd accidentally brushed against her in the copy room, his hand lingering far too long on her shoulder as he reached past her for paper. The day before, he'd placed his hand on her back during a department meeting, calling it friendly encouragement when she'd stiffened at his touch. Each incident pushed the boundaries further, testing how much she would tolerate. Mrs. Harris? Jessica, one of her more perceptive students, approached her desk after class ended. Are you okay? You seem different lately. Monica forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Just thinking about our upcoming literature project. As the last students filtered out, Monica began organizing materials for her next class. The quiet shuffle of footsteps behind her made her spine stiffen. She'd grown to recognize Greer's particular gait. Working hard as always, Mrs. Harris? His voice carried that false warmth she'd come to dread. Is there something you need, Mr. Greer? Monica kept her tone professional, deliberately moving to maintain distance between them. He closed the classroom door with a soft click. Just checking on my favorite teacher. You know, you've become quite distracting lately. Monica's hand tightened around her pen. I have work to do, Mr. Greer. If there's nothing specific, there is actually... He moved closer, backing her toward her desk. I've been thinking about our situation. Perhaps we could come to an arrangement that would make things easier for everyone. There's no situation to discuss, Monica said firmly. Please maintain a professional distance. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Don't play coy, Monica. You must know the effect you have walking around in these provocative outfits. His eyes raked over her conservative pencil skirt and blouse. Remove your hand. Monica's voice was steel. Now. Instead, he stepped closer, his other hand reaching for her waist. Or what? You'll file another complaint? We both know how well that worked out. The sharp crack of Monica's palm against his cheek echoed through the classroom. I said no. Greer's face contorted with rage. He grabbed both her arms, shoving her against the desk. You uppity little... Get your hands off my wife. The voice from the doorway was quiet, but carried the weight of authority that only comes from years of command. Monica had never been so relieved to hear anything in her life. Elijah Harris stood in the classroom doorway, still in his police captain's uniform, a forgotten takeout bag hanging from one hand. His dark eyes took in the scene with professional assessment. His wife pressed against her desk, Greer's hands gripping her arms, the red mark blooming on Greer's cheek. I said, Elijah repeated, each word precise and measured as he stepped into the room. Get your hands off my wife. Greer released Monica immediately, stepping back. Your wife? Yes, my wife, replied Elijah, barely containing his fury. Officer, this isn't what it looks like. Your wife and I were just having a professional discussion, stammered Greer, color draining from his face entirely. About what? Elijah's voice remained eerily calm as he moved to stand beside Monica. What professional discussion requires you to put your hands on a teacher? There's been a misunderstanding. Greer attempted a placating smile. Mrs. Harris became emotional during our conversation. I was simply trying to calm her down. Is that true, Monica? Elijah asked, never taking his eyes off Greer. Monica straightened her blouse, her voice steady. No. Mr. Greer has been harassing me for months, making inappropriate comments, invading my personal space, touching me without permission. When I rejected his advances just now, he became physically aggressive. That's absurd. Greer sputtered. This is clearly a fabrication. I would never. She's got documentation. Sarah Mitchell's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with several other teachers, drawn by the commotion. We all do. Every incident. Every inappropriate comment, every time he cornered her alone, Greer's face darkened. You have no proof. Actually, Monica interrupted, pulling out her phone, I do. She pressed play on a voice recording app, and Greer's earlier words filled the room. Don't play coy, Monica. You must know the effect you have. I've been recording our interactions since the board dismissed my complaint, Monica explained. Along with security camera footage from the hallways showing how often you've cornered me alone, Elijah pulled out his own phone, his thumb hovering over the keypad. Lester Greer, you're under arrest for sexual harassment and assault. I suggest you don't make this any harder than it needs to be. You can't arrest me. Greer's voice rose hysterically. Do you know who I am? Who my family is? Yes, Elijah replied calmly. You're a man who just assaulted my wife in front of witnesses. Your family connections won't help you this time. He pressed a button on his phone. Within minutes, Two uniformed officers appeared at the classroom door. Officers Johnson and Rodriguez. Elijah nodded to them. Please escort Mr. Greer to the station. He's under arrest for sexual harassment and assault. Make sure to read him his rights. As the officers moved forward with handcuffs, Greer tried to bolt. He made it 2 steps before Officer Rodriguez caught him, smoothly securing his hands behind his back. This is ridiculous, Greer shouted as they let him out. Richard will hear about this. The board will never stand for. The board, came a new voice, will be conducting a full investigation. Dr. Patricia Chun, the district superintendent, stepped into the classroom. Her presence commanded immediate attention. I received an anonymous package this morning containing extensive documentation of complaints against Principal Greer, complaints that apparently never made it to my office. She turned to Monica. Mrs. Harris, I owe you an apology. It seems there's been a systematic effort to suppress reports of Mr. Greer's inappropriate behavior. Rest assured, this will be thoroughly investigated. By now, a crowd had gathered in the hallway, teachers, students, and staff watching as Greer was led away in handcuffs. Sarah pushed through to Monica's side. I sent the documentation, she admitted quietly. After I saw how the board handled your complaint, I gathered everything I could find, every incident report, every transferred teacher statement, everything that had been buried over the years. I couldn't let it continue. Monica hugged her friend tightly. Thank you. As the crowd dispersed, Elijah pulled Monica into a tight embrace. Why didn't you tell me what was happening? Monica leaned into his strength. You had enough to deal with, being the new captain. I thought I could handle it myself. Hey, he lifted her chin gently. We're partners, remember? Your battles are my battles. Don't ever think you have to face something like this alone. I know, she smiled softly. I just didn't want to make waves. With you being new in your position, making waves is exactly what we're supposed to do, he replied firmly. How else do things change? Sarah approached them hesitantly. Monica, some of us are gathering at Riverside Cafe after school, teachers who've dealt with Greer over the years. We thought, maybe we could all share our stories? Start healing? Monica looked at Elijah, who nodded. Go. I've got some paperwork to file at the station anyway. Dinner later. Dinner later, she agreed, kissing him softly. And Elijah? Thank you. For everything. Always, he smiled, squeezing her hand before heading out. As Monica gathered her things, preparing to leave with Sarah, she paused to look around her classroom. The posters of diverse historical figures still hung proudly on the walls, her students' work displayed alongside them. She thought of all the times Greer had tried to make her feel small, to force her into his narrow vision of what belonged at Riverside High. Ready? Sarah asked from the doorway. Monica smiled, straightening her shoulders. Ready? Together, they walked out into the autumn sunshine, leaving behind the shadow of fear that had haunted these halls for too long. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, implementing changes, healing old wounds, building trust. But for now, Monica savored the simple feeling of walking tall, knowing she had stood her ground not just for herself, but for every teacher and student who deserved to feel safe and respected in their school. As they drove to the cafe, Monica's phone buzzed with messages of support from colleagues and parents who had witnessed Greer's arrest. Even some of the board members were reaching out, suddenly eager to distance themselves from their former ally. You know what this means, right? Sarah asked as they parked. Everything's going to change now. Monica thought of her students, of the teachers gathering inside to share their stories, of the possibility of building something better from the ashes of Greer's regime. That's exactly what we needed, she replied, her voice firm with conviction. Change. The cafe, door open to welcoming faces and raised cups of coffee, to teachers finally free to speak their truth, to the beginning of healing. Monica took her seat among them, ready to listen, ready to lead, ready to help build the kind of school community she had always believed possible. The autumn sun slanted through the cafe windows, painting everything in warm, hopeful light. Outside, life in Riverside continued as always, but within these walls, something new was taking root, something built on courage, integrity, and the unshakable belief that standing up for what's right, no matter the cost, was always worth the fight. And in the end, that made all the difference. The weeks following Lester Greer's arrest transformed Riverside High in ways no one could have predicted. Like a dam finally breaking, stories of past harassment and discrimination began pouring out, each revelation adding to the growing tide of change sweeping through the school. Monica sat in her living room one evening, surrounded by stacks of letters and emails, testimonies from former teachers and staff members who had suffered under Greer's regime. Each account painted a picture of systematic abuse enabled by a complicit school board. "Listen to this one," she said to Elijah, who sat beside her reviewing police reports. "I was forced to resign in 2019 after Greer threatened to ruin my teaching career. When I tried to report his behavior, Richard Thompson personally called me to suggest I'd think carefully about my future in education." Elijah shook his head, his jaw tightening. "The more we dig, the worse it gets. We've identified at least 12 teachers who were either forced out or transferred after filing complaints. And those are just the ones who've come forward," Sarah added from her perch on the armchair. She'd become a regular visitor to the Harris household, helping coordinate the growing network of Greer's victims. Many are still afraid to speak up, worried about professional retaliation. The doorbell rang, and Monica rose to answer it. Dr. Chin stood on the porch, holding a thick manila envelope. "Mrs. Harris, may I come in? There have been some developments I think you should know about." Once seated, the superintendent opened the envelope, spreading documents across the coffee table. "The State Board of Education has completed their preliminary investigation. The findings are damning, to say the least." "How bad?" Elijah asked, leaning forward. "Bad enough that criminal charges are being considered against several board members, including Richard Thompson." Dr. Chin removed her glasses, rubbing her eyes tiredly. "We found evidence of systematic cover-ups going back over a decade. Thompson used his position to bury complaints, alter personnel files, even threaten teachers who tried to speak up." Monica picked up one of the documents, scanning its contents. "These transfer orders, they're all fabricated?" "Every single one," Dr. Chin confirmed. "Thompson created paper trails to justify moving problematic teachers to less desirable positions. He even manipulated performance reviews to make it look like they deserved their demotions." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Janet Williams?" "Her supposed performance issues were completely manufactured," Dr. Chin nodded. "The board will be offering her full reinstatement, along with back pay and damages." The conversation was interrupted by Monica's phone buzzing, a news alert. She read it aloud. "Breaking. Riverside School Board member Richard Thompson resigns amid harassment cover-up scandal." "That's just the beginning," Dr. Chin said grimly. "The entire board is being dissolved. The state is appointing temporary administrators until special elections can be held." The next morning, Monica arrived at school to find a crowd gathered in the parking lot. Teachers, students, and parents stood together, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Mrs. Harris," and "Justice at last." Jessica, her student from earlier in the year, broke away from the crowd to hug her. "You showed us how to be brave, Mrs. Harris. How to stand up for what's right." Inside, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Teachers who had once hurried through the halls with downcast eyes now walked tall, chatting openly in groups. The forced silence of fear had been replaced by the vibrant hum of voices reclaiming their space. "Mrs. Harris." A group of teachers waved her into the lounge. "Have you seen the news? They're holding an emergency community meeting tonight." The meeting, held in the school gymnasium, drew hundreds of community members. Monica sat between Elijah and Sarah, watching as person after person approached the microphone to share their stories. "My daughter came home crying because Principal Greer said her natural hair was unprofessional," one mother testified, her voice shaking with anger. "She was 12 years old." A former teacher spoke next. "He told me my accent would confuse the students and suggested I stick to teaching ESL classes. When I complained, I was suddenly assigned to monitor detention every day after school." The most powerful moment came when Janet Williams took the stage. She stood straight and proud, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed gym. "For 3 years, I've carried the shame of believing I wasn't good enough to teach AP classes," she began. "I questioned my abilities, my worth as an educator. But now I know the truth. The only shame belongs to those who abuse their power to protect a predator." The crowd erupted in applause. Dr. Chen stepped up next, holding an official statement from the district. On behalf of the Riverside School District, I want to formally apologize to every person who has suffered under the leadership of Lester Greer and the negligence of our school board. Effective immediately, all negative personnel actions initiated by Mr. Greer or approved by Richard Thompson are being reviewed and reversed. She paused, making eye contact with Monica. We owe a special debt of gratitude to Monica Harris, whose courage in standing up to harassment inspired others to come forward. Mrs. Harris exemplifies the qualities we should celebrate in our educators: integrity, determination, and an unwavering commitment to justice. After the meeting, families lingered in the parking lot, sharing stories and support. Monica found herself surrounded by colleagues, many of whom were apologizing for not speaking up sooner. "Don't apologize," she told them firmly. "Fear is a powerful silencer. What matters is that we're speaking now." Later that week, the district announced sweeping changes. A new anti-harassment policy was implemented, including mandatory reporting procedures and protections for whistleblowers. The dress code was revised to eliminate discriminatory language about hair and cultural expressions. Most importantly, a diverse committee of teachers, parents, and students was formed to oversee these changes. One afternoon, as Monica worked in her classroom, Elijah appeared in the doorway holding a newspaper. "Have you seen this?" he asked, holding up the front page. The headline read, "Former Principal Greer pleads guilty to multiple charges of harassment and assault." Monica took the paper, scanning the article. 5 years in prison plus probation. And he can never work in education again. Justice served, Elijah smiled, wrapping his arms around her. "How does it feel?" "Honestly," Monica leaned back against him, "I'm just grateful it's over. Now we can focus on building something better." And they were. The following months saw Riverside High transform into the kind of school Monica had always envisioned. Diversity was celebrated, not merely tolerated. Teachers felt empowered to innovate in their classrooms. Students from all backgrounds saw themselves represented in the curriculum and leadership. Sarah was appointed interim department head, her first act being to organize a cultural awareness week that celebrated the diverse heritage of their student body. Janet Williams returned to teaching AP Literature, her classes quickly becoming among the most popular in school. 1 year to the day after Greer's arrest, Monica stood before the newly elected school board, presenting a proposal for a mentorship program designed to support minority teachers in the district. "What happened at Riverside High wasn't just about one man's prejudice," she explained. "It was about a system that allowed that prejudice to flourish. By creating support networks and clear accountability measures, we can ensure it never happens again." The proposal passed unanimously. As Monica gathered her materials, the new board chair, a community activist named Marcus Rodriguez, approached her. "You know, Mrs. Harris, when my daughter told me she wanted to be a teacher, I worried about the challenges she'd face as a woman of color in education. But seeing what you've accomplished here gives me hope." That evening, Monica and Elijah hosted a dinner party for the teachers who had become their extended family over the past year. Sarah, Janet, and others gathered around their dining table, sharing stories and laughter. "Remember how scared we all used to be?" Janet mused, sipping her wine. "It seems like another lifetime." "Fear only works when we're isolated," Monica replied. "Together, we're stronger than any bully's threats." The conversation flowed late into the night, touching on their hopes for the future and the changes they'd already seen. When the last guest had left, Monica and Elijah stood on their porch, watching the stars. "You know what makes me proudest?" Elijah said suddenly. "What's that?" "The way you turned your personal struggle into positive change for the whole community. You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for everyone who needed a voice." Monica smiled, thinking of her students' faces when they saw the new multicultural library collection, of the young teachers who now approached their classes with confidence, of the parents who no longer worried about their children facing discrimination at school. "That's what teaching is really about," she said softly. "Showing others their own strength, helping them find their voice." The next morning, Monica walked into her classroom early, as she always did. The sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the walls now covered with student artwork, multicultural literature posters, and that same Maya Angelou quote that had sustained her through the darkest days. Still I rise. Jessica appeared in the doorway, no longer the timid student from the beginning of the year. Mrs. Harris, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetie. I'm thinking about becoming a teacher, Jessica said, fidgeting slightly. But after everything that happened, it seems scary. Monica gestured for her to sit. Let me tell you something about being scared, Jessica. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're about to do something brave. Like you did? Like we all did, Monica corrected gently. Change doesn't happen because of one person's courage. It happens when people stand together, support each other, and refuse to accept injustice as normal. Jessica smiled, her confidence visibly growing. So you think I should do it? I think you should do whatever calls to your heart, Monica replied. And know that wherever you go, whatever challenges you face, you'll never have to face them alone. As Jessica left for her first class, Monica turned to write the day's objectives on the board. The familiar routine felt different now. Not just a task, but a reminder of victory, of persistence, of the power of standing firm in the face of intimidation. The morning announcements crackled over the intercom, Dr. Chen's voice warm and clear. Good morning, Riverside High. Today marks 1 year since we began our journey toward becoming a more inclusive, equitable, and just community. Thank you all for your part in this transformation. Remember, every voice matters, every story counts, and together we rise. Monica smiled, picking up her lesson plans for the day. The classroom slowly filled with students, all colors, all backgrounds, all belonging. This was her victory, their victory, a reminder that change was possible when courage met opportunity and truth refused to be silenced. And in that moment, watching her students settle into their seats, Monica knew that the real story wasn't about defeating a bully or exposing corruption. It was about the power of community, the strength found in standing together, and the endless possibilities that open up when people refuse to let fear define their limits. The bell rang, signaling the start of another day at the new Riverside High. A school transformed not just by one woman's courage, but by the collective strength of all those who dare to stand up, speak out, and believe in the possibility of change. Good morning, class, Monica said, her voice strong and clear. Today we're going to talk about voice, finding it, using it, and understanding its power to change the world. And in the eager faces before her, she saw the future, bright, bold, and unafraid. Thank you for joining us in this powerful story of resilience, courage, and justice. Monica's journey reminds us of the strength it takes to stand up against those who misuse their power. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. And let us know in the comments how this story resonated with you, and if you've ever faced such harassment in your workplace. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right.